The lived experience mantra, an end justify the means attitude, makes open and honest debate impossible. Physicians' self-censoring has become the norm if you want to keep your paycheck and increasingly your medical license.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians. To overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be, visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. And don't forget, you can earn CME credit just by listening today, so check the show notes for more information about CMify. Well, my guest today is a very successful neurologist in Menlo Park, California. She's got some great ideas on how physicians can get back to taking care of patients instead of jumping through hoops for insurance companies. So let's hear my conversation with Dr. Diana Blum. It's my pleasure today to be speaking with Dr. Diana Blum, who is coming to us from Menlo Park, California, I think. Is that right, Diana?
Actually, I just moved to Palo Alto. So.
Oh, did you really?
Yes.
Okay, well, now I've got you in the right place. But what a pleasure it is to have you here. I'm really looking forward to hearing your story.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, Diana, as we always do, we're going to begin with your beginnings. I'm always interested in how people became interested in medicine and decided to make the decision to make it a career. How did that work for you? Did that happen early in your childhood, or how did that come about?
Actually, I was a little bit dissuaded to go into medicine. Both of my parents used to be physicians back in the former Soviet Union.
Really?
Yeah, they gave all of that up to come to the U.S. and for freedom. But unfortunately, at the time, they could not. It's basically starting the whole process over. You have to do residency after passing boards again, and they didn't even speak English. So,
really, that's fascinating.
They ended up being nurses. So they worked. Actually, my mom retired after being a nurse for over 25 years at UCSF. And my dad, he started off being a nurse, but I think it was difficult for him after being, chief of staff of his hospital. So
they could get credentialed as nurses in California, but not physicians, or did they have to do any additional education even before they became nurses? How did that work?
So they had to pass a test, but, for a physician, the nursing test was pretty easy to pass, at least for them. So they passed both tests, and then they just started working. The problem with if they wanted to pursue medicine is they'd have to redo the residency. And at the time, the priority was putting food on the table. So it was just not an option. And their English was so poor that it just would not be feasible at the time. Yeah. So they worked. And it was nice because I got kind of that perspective, both from the nursing perspective and then also from the doctor's perspective, because they would tell me stories about how, medicine should be and what their experience in seeing things. So I was kind of discouraged away from it. And when I started college, I was not pre-med. I actually was a psychology and Russian literature major.
Yeah, I noticed that. So at that point, medical school wasn't really on the radar.
Not really. Until I really started learning, a lot of my psychology classes were cognitive neuroscience classes, and when I started learning about kind of the brain and the brain's connection to the body and how diseases, and then I started learning about some diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and that was kind of what triggered my interest in going into medical school, because I realized to be able to treat the patients with those diseases, I'd have to go to med school for that. So that's kind of a roundabout way of how I got there. And luckily, with the BS in psychology, I did do some of the basic science work, but certainly not enough. And so I actually ended up taking a year off between college and medical school to, apply, finish up, do all the things I didn't have a chance to do
That's a
while in
really
college.
interesting story. Were your parents pretty excited when you made that decision?
Probably yes and no. I think the field of medicine and taking care of it's kind of ingrained in probably my DNA going back. Um, uh, and part of it is probably related to I'm Jewish, so there's certain Jewish values where you use the sanctity of life, and the he who saves a life saves the world entire. So that kind of was always, I think, part of my growing up and valuing life and valuing caring for people. And so they weren't too surprised. Part of it was a little bit of, I think, worry, knowing what it takes to become a doctor. So that there was some of that. But no, once I made the decision, they were supportive. They weren't going to stand in the way of that.
And it looks like, as I look at your CV, you actually wound up going to 2 different medical schools. Is there a story there?
Yes. So I was dating at that time. He was just my boyfriend, and when I was applying to medical schools, he's like, "Well, what's your criteria?" And I said, "Well, I really don't do well in cold weather." So he's like, "Well, you definitely don't want to apply to any schools in Chicago." That's where he went to college. And so I didn't. I applied. I avoided Chicago because he told me that it was really cold. So I ended up in LA. And of course, at that point, he moved down with me to LA and we got engaged. And what does he do? He gets into business school in Chicago.
Oh my goodness.
So there was kind of a choice of us being apart for a couple of years, or me trying to transfer. And and so that's literally, I had to apply to med school for a second time. Yeah. So
was the transfer process difficult?
It was literally applying to medical school a second time. So like as I'm doing my, gross anatomy final exam, I'm writing my secondary applications and flying out for interviews. It was literally all over. And at the time, University of Chicago was the only school in Chicago that would even entertain a second year transfer. And at that time, there were no spots. So they still encouraged me to apply, saying, you never know, a spot will open up. But when I did it, like I was applying for no spots. And obviously it all worked out.
And was it your internship year, your transitional year, did that happen in Chicago as well?
That was in Chicago, yeah. We decided, my husband was finishing up his job, and we decided to stay for my intern year. And then we moved out to California. And that was basically, the 4 years of Chicago was it. I could not handle another winter. I love the city, but the weather
my goodness
was as described. Yeah. So
clearly your memories of Russia must have been kind of fuzzy, or were you born in Russia?
Well, back, technically nowadays, back then it was Soviet Union. Technically it was the Ukraine. So, and this is quite
even
interesting.
More interesting.
Well, a little bit now, right? Because of what's happening. And I grew up, I never spoke Ukrainian. I always spoke Russian, because actually in the Soviet Union, you spoke Russian.
Of course.
And so growing up, I kind of considered myself Russian. It wasn't until recently that, people started asking about well, what is your identity? I'm like, back
Mm-hmm.
then we were all, and then forgive me, I hope I'm not, but this is just the reality. We were all considered dirty Jews, right? Żyd was the
Sure.
name. So I never
Mm-hmm.
associated myself with being Ukrainian or Russian. Even my passport said Jew, it didn't say one or the other. So, yeah, that's honestly why I wanted to study a little bit more, because I grew up speaking the language, but I really did not appreciate much of the nuance of that culture. And it's definitely a complicated culture, especially for
Yeah,
immigrants.
I'm
Um,
sure it is.
yeah. So,
What goes through your mind as you sort of look at what's going on there today, if anything? I mean, maybe you were so young you can't grasp it, but do you have any feelings?
I mean, obviously, the bigger picture of a sovereign country being attacked by another country, like that big picture, and of course, human suffering that goes along with all of that hits home, and on multiple levels. Obviously, seeing refugees, knowing I was a refugee, not
Mm-hmm.
in those circumstances, but my grandfather, he just passed away in February. He fled from Romania during the World War II,
Mm-hmm.
and so that whole, when he passed away in February, part of me was like, thank God that he wasn't around to see this, because it's
Oh my,
obviously
yeah,
triggering a lot of wounds. So for that, it's more of just for humanity and the suffering that's involved, but not. I can't say I have a personal connection, because I don't have any
sure.
family there right now.
Yeah, I understand.
And when we left, it was kind of, saying goodbye more permanently
Yeah.
to a life we didn't really feel like we belonged in anyway.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians for physicians to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics. Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. All right, well, let's move your professional development along a little bit. After that transitional year, the internship year, you had somewhere along the way made a decision that neurology was for you, and you wanted to get back to a warmer climate, and it was back to California, right?
Yeah, I've listened to some of your other interviews, and a lot of people say they go through medical school and it's really hard to decide because they love everything. Well, for me, it's like the opposite because I really, even before med school, I kind of knew I wanted to do neuro. And then going through it, like it was like, yep, don't like that, don't like that. So I went through all the other rotations kind of saying, gosh, I'm fortunate that I know what I want to do and nothing else is kind of pulling me into a different direction, which was nice. And so, yeah, neuro just seemed like it was the best place for me. And because I knew that back then, I mean, this is going back now almost 20 years, neuro was not even a required rotation in third year. I think that's changed. So it was considered like an elective in your fourth year. Well, how do you apply to neuro when you haven't done it yet, right? And it was an early match. So I was fortunate enough to, kind of create my own elective in neuro with one of like the grandfathers of neurology back then. I don't even know if he's alive anymore, Dr. Barry Arneson. And he made me fall in love with diagnosis, right? He always talked about like, you're a puzzle, maker. You're gathering all this information and you're gonna, with all your critical thinking skills, come up with an answer where many of your colleagues may not be able to even ask the right questions. Like that was the whole point. He was like, I'm going to teach you how to ask the right questions so that by the time you exit the room, 95% of the time you already know what's happening. You shouldn't need to order tests and, do the stuff if you've taken a good history. So that's kind of how I was taught, is you take the time to really get to know what the issues are with the patient. And 90% of the time, 95% of the time, the exam obviously is very helpful in neurology. I think we're probably the last people that touch patients because our exam really gives us a lot of information to either rule in or rule out what's on our differential diagnosis. But at the end of the day, he was absolutely right. Even today, I mean, I spend the time with my patients and I kind of know what's going on by the time they're, leaving the room. Like, there's very little that I have to order because I'm still stuck and I have no idea what this patient is dealing with.
But I'm still just a little bit puzzled, and you bring up a very good point. When I was in medical school back at about the time that the earth cooled, a neurology rotation was not a required rotation at all. There was some exposure. If you had patients on the general internal medicine services that needed a neurological consult, you were going to get to sort of experience that from afar. And if you can, I'd be interested to know how you think you were able to tease out from all that this is where you needed to go. And if the answer is it was just the luck of the draw, I'll take that. But I really am curious about how people find their way into specialties that they get no exposure to whatsoever as a junior medical student. So what do you think?
So I actually grew up with a couple of aunts with Parkinson's. So I had some pretty early on exposure to at least and I think that's why when I was in college, I got fascinated by the brain, as because growing up, I watched this disease manifest itself physically, and so I had that. And then that year that I took off between college and medical school, I actually worked at UCSF in their research department with multiple sclerosis patients. So I got hands-on experience as a research assistant working with MS patients. And again, that kind of peek into what happens to the body when, the brain has some issues.
Yeah.
So going in, I kind of had already that. And then when I was going through the other rotations, it was more realizing, like I thought if anything was going to keep me, or pull me away from neurology, it may have been psychiatry, because that was also, obviously brain, emotions, but I really love the neurological diseases. Like the neuroplasticity of the brain. So some of my research was, how do you rewire the brain, right? How do emotions affect, our memories? Like that was some of my college research that I did. And so for me, that, I don't know, for whatever reason, the rest of medicine kind of was a necessary evil to get through, but not necessarily something that I would be doing.
Well, the rest of us are fortunate that there are people like you who have the courage and the tenacity to go into that territory, because it is, as you say, profoundly important. It remains so mysterious to me throughout my 44 years in practice, when the neurologist would come and tell me things that I would never have guessed. So I must tell you that I am awestruck by what the neurologists do at the bedside and otherwise. But I want to move along and find out what your post-residency career has been like. You find yourself, you actually established the practice that you have right now. Is that correct?
That's right. So I briefly worked for about 4 years in one of the big box kind of healthcare organizations.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that in California.
Right. Well, there's a lot of that, unfortunately, throughout the country. Having a private practice
Indeed.
these days is more rare. And with the pandemic, unfortunately, we fell actually below 50% for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So, but for me, I realized that to be able to really give these patients the medical care that they really deserve, that takes time. There's no way around it. You cannot, properly diagnose or treat someone in, 10 minutes. It's not sustainable. Inevitably things are going to get missed. And so I felt like the only way to do this is to go out on my own. So back in the end of 2013, so I say this because now this whole direct specialty care, direct primary care, where you kind of get rid of all the third-party middlemen, it's really starting to pick up since the pandemic. I think physicians have wisened up a little bit and are starting to take control back. But 7-8 years ago, when I went out on my own, that wasn't the case. So I literally had 0 patients when I opened up my practice, and slowly over time, one patient at a time, I built it up to my practice is actually closed, and I have a waiting list now. So yeah, good quality care people will seek out.
Attention healthcare professionals. Have you lost control of your career? Do you feel like you need to hit the reset button? If you're tired of uncertainty, struggling to find balance in your career, frustrated with pay cuts, extended shifts, or insurance aggravation, well then, it's time for you to change your life and carve out the career of your dreams. Join Dr. Jarrett Patton and others at Licensed to Live, the conference, July 8 through 10, 2022, live from the Bellevue in Philadelphia. Explore the vast possibilities available to you as a physician or healthcare executive and ignite your career into the life you desire. Hear from expert healthcare professionals as they offer actionable, dynamic, and inspirational information, and get ready to leave inspired, ready to create the career you love, licensed to live. It's time for you to be happy. And as an added benefit, all attendees become subscribers to receive the print copy of Physician Outlook magazine. For early bird reservations, go to rxforsuccesspodcast.com/live. Diana, you bring up a very interesting point, and that is how many physicians nowadays, without really giving it too much thought, and I think it's largely because they feel like they don't have a choice, but people graduate from medical school and they have so much education debt that the notion of being a part of a private, either starting a private practice or being in a private practice where they have to pay into the system before they can become a partner seems just unapproachable. When here is somebody over here that says, look, you don't have to worry about anything except taking care of sick people, and we'll send you a paycheck, and life will be great. And that sounds pretty good, but I think that we're beginning to see that people are wising up to that, and they realize that if you work for anybody other than the patient, that you're going to come into some roadblocks. Does that ring a bell with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, the fundamental problem practicing medicine, and it's not even, practicing medicine these days. We're all practicing healthcare. So this is the fundamental problem: is that there's too many entities in between the doctor and the patient, and there's really very little autonomy when the doctor is employed, because suddenly they got to follow the rules of their employer. So is their loyalty to the Hippocratic Oath and the patient in front of them that they swore to prioritize, or is it that they need a paycheck to pay bills and like you said, their debt, and there's a conflict of interest there that can absolutely arise and negatively impact patient care. And I don't think a lot of people coming out of training appreciate that. And I think that in itself has also changed over the past decade. I think that the demands on following protocols and algorithms are increasing, and the message for a lot of these employed physicians are, well, if you're not going to follow it, then we've got other people standing in line ready to do it. And guess what? We can call them doctors now too, because our government is legislating away the practice of medicine. I mean, that's just the reality. And you've had some amazing guests, some of my inspiring warrior, advocates on here, I think, kind of touching to some of these topics.
We have. We're always looking for people like that, and I'm certainly glad that you turned up in that search, because the word burnout is on just about everybody's lips in the healthcare world, and I can't help but think that this enforced treatment of physicians as employees that have to live by a certain set of rules, regardless of how they feel about the patient, might be a causative factor in that. Would you agree with that or not?
Absolutely. I personally don't like the word burnout, to be honest. I think this
Yeah,
is more...
I'm kind of with you on that. It's kind of been overworked, but
right.
I don't know what else to call it. Yeah.
I think burnout is gaslighting the victim. It basically, I'm burnt out because I couldn't handle it. That's how I perceive it.
That's very insightful.
Whereas, physicians are probably the most resilient, bunch that you'll find. I mean, just going through the process of the pre-med, curriculum, and then med school, and then residency, and all the emotional roller coasters, that go. We are resilient human beings. That's not the issue. The issue is when we're faced with this dissonance of, I took an oath, this is what I know is right, and yet here I am being told, no, I got to do it this way, and I know that my actions doing it this way is going to harm somebody. And so that's where a lot of physicians find themselves, is how do we practice medicine, honoring the oath we took while keeping our jobs? I mean, that's ultimately what I think what's leading to this, quote, burnout, or what I'll call as moral injury.
I spent most of my career whining about the fact that it appeared to me that the majority of physicians that I work with and around spent more time fighting with each other than they did fighting disease. And I don't even want to try to get into a discussion about how that came about, but it did. And it seems to me that disagreement amongst those that should be colleagues created a great opportunity of weakness. So the stronger forces could take over, and they did. If physicians had behaved more cohesively over the last 50 years, would it have been less likely for medicine to have been taken over by the corporate interests that have it today?
That's a great question. I obviously was not around to know how, the field has evolved 50 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but I've had a front row seat to the last 15 years. And I would say the biggest challenges for physicians came in the last 10 years, shortly after the ACA passed. And I think it's one of those things where good intentions can have negative consequences. And it's unfortunate that even physicians who recognize a lot of the how should I say it? A lot of the negative consequences are often in positions where they just can't speak up about them. Going back to the whole, conflict of interest, I need to keep my paycheck kind of thing. And so I would say what I observed was when the EMR became a mandated entity, which really, was billed as, look at how amazingly we're going to be able to communicate with one another, and this is going to unite physicians over better patient care. But I saw in reality, it was the destruction of the physician note. So now when I get records, they're completely uninterpreted. I mean, it's copy and paste of 10 notes. And it's so interesting because it could be different providers through different specialties. And yet it's the same history, because it's all copy and pasted. And really it became a billing machine. So the whole point of the EMR was checking boxes for optimization of billing, and it had nothing to do with actually improving patient care or, communication between physicians, or actually it was a barrier because now it's even hard to, like the phone numbers I used to have for doctors' private offices, those are no longer working because doctors don't even have private offices. We're all in these big, conglomerations. So it's just so I don't know about the 40 years before. I can say the biggest change was in the last 10 years. And I do see the ACA as being, the fuel for that.
I'm going to take an opportunity to tell you exactly how correct you are because I was there, for a period of 44 years. And what I saw was that there was considerable enthusiasm for electronic medical records in the beginning in the 80s. And when the architecture of the EMR was being conducted by physicians for physicians, they were coming up with some really good products. And I don't want to personalize the interview too much, but I will tell you that I saw a system when my hospital was looking for an EMR. I saw a system that was built by a company that I won't name. But in any case, I and some of my physician colleagues went to sample it, and I was just astounded. We were able to sit down, and I was able to open this physician order entry system, and I was able to use it without any instruction whatsoever and do what I needed to do. And subsequently, we made a contract with this company to buy their electronic medical record. It took 2 years to get everybody in agreement, but it finally happened. And by the time it got to us, the physician order entry system had become so foreign and so complex and so obtuse that I was never able to use it. And what I'm pointing to is exactly what you're talking about. I think what happened with the Affordable Care Act is because it put a deadline on when it had to be online. It took all the choices away from those of us who were being affected. We couldn't stand up and say, hey, this doesn't work. We're not going to use it. We just had to do it. So all I'm trying to do is emphasize exactly what you just said, and that is they gave us a system of record keeping and billing that turned out to be not a record keeper at all. It was just a cash register.
That's right.
So
That's
it
right.
sounds like we're in agreement on that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why, in this new practice, I want, because it didn't stop at the ACA. Then there was MIPS, then there was MAPS. I mean, there's like regulation after regulation, basically making a bureaucratic nightmare to practice medicine unless you're employed and have a whole division, doing that for you. So in my current practice, it's easy. There's no insurance, there's no Medicare. There's nothing. There's me and my patient, and we have a direct contract. And the way, my practice works is patients pay me a monthly fee and I take care of them. So if I have to see them every week just to fine tune their medicines until we get it right, then it doesn't matter because that's the monthly fee. And if I, normally I see my patients either way every 6 weeks. But my point is that getting back to get rid of all the third-party middlemen and getting back to this direct care model is how we take back medicine. And I
So for all intents and purposes, you're functioning as a single specialty HMO.
Well, I don't know about that would make me an insurance, and that I can't.
Well,
I can't
that's exactly my point. So you don't need insurance. You don't have to deal with insurance. That's out of the way. You're paid by a monthly fee, and there's no arguing about what tests you can order and what drugs you can order and all those kinds of things.
Well, so here's the thing is all the tests and all the meds and all those still need to be covered, right? So patients still use their insurance for all those things. So it's not like patients can not have insurance. But I
understand. We're not in Shangri-La yet.
Right. Right. But you'd be surprised, a lot of uninsured patients love this model because they know that otherwise good luck seeing, a neurologist in a big, conglomeration. Absolutely. With the facility fees. So it actually does fill an unmet need for the uninsured. The funny thing is that I'm able to argue with the insurance companies more because I have nothing to lose, right? They want to deny something, I'm going to appeal it. My office manager will get on the phone and be like, "You plan on denying this? Hold on, the doctor's here. She's ready to do the appeal." So because again, I'm not worried about anything. They're not going to cancel a contract for me. They're not going to raise or decrease my reimbursement rates for next year. These are all the things that even when doctors don't want to admit are, influence their decisions when they're taking care of people. It does. I've talked to enough people where they're like, I'm not supposed to look and see if the patient has an HMO or a PPO, but I know that I'll get dinged if I order this test for an HMO patient, but not a PPO patient. And so hearing that, to me, I'm like, well, then you're not practicing Hippocratic Oath medicine. You're not putting the patient in front of you and what their needs are. So this is fundamentally the biggest problem I see right now, and that we're not providing individualized patient care, and especially in neurology. How do you practice if you're not taking the individual patient's needs, especially in a disease like Parkinson's, which is what I manage, right? The brain is connected to the body in a way that it's wired one way here, and another patient it's wired in a different way. And there's just no cookbook for what comes into your office that's going to be A plus B equals C, and yet that's what they're trying to have people practice medicine this way.
Diana, this has really been fascinating. You are I'm not sure. I was about to say you are the first person who is dealing with a self-pay model. I've talked to a number of family practitioners, that do direct primary care. But to see it in a specialty is very encouraging to me, and it leads me to think that perhaps there really is a light out there at the end of this tunnel. And I am fascinated with the way that you've brought it about, and I'm really excited for what your future might be like. And I've enjoyed talking to you today, but what I want to do at this point is kind of get out of your way and give you an opportunity to speak on your own. And I'm going to pause, and Dr. Diana Blum is going to offer her personal prescriptions for success.
Thanks, Randy. I wrote this as a letter to my pre-med self, reflecting on what I've learned over the last 20 plus years and kind of some of my prescriptions for making this journey a little easier. So here goes. Dear me, please take a deep breath before reading this letter from the year 2022. The unfortunate reality is that practicing Hippocratic Oath medicine has become near obsolete since you applied to medical school in 1999. In fact, defending the oath itself has become a tremendous challenge, and the resultant moral injury has caused a mass exodus of physician colleagues from clinical practice. You will wonder why you gave up your 20s and early 30s to study and train as hard as you did, only to accrue hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and to learn that much of the public has very little appreciation, much less value, for your rigorous education, training, or experience. These days, an online degree with barely any clinical prep gets you the title doctor and a government-sanctioned license to kill. The humble mentality you were once taught in medical school, first do no harm because you don't know what you still don't know, that's long gone. Confidence has replaced competence because in today's healthcare purgatory, all providers appear to be interchangeable. Critical thinking skills are now a liability for employers who prefer that patient care be delivered based on productivity optimization algorithms. And that pesky oath physicians took, that just keeps getting in the way. You will witness government-sanctioned corporatization of your once sacred profession destroy the doctor-patient relationship by creating bureaucratic barrier after barrier. You will report examples of patient harm caused by the prioritization of profits over patient care, only to realize those with power could care less about the human suffering. And just when you didn't think things could get any worse, you will discover that in 2020, scientific method principles and informed consent are no longer respected. Instead, the lived experience mantra and end justify the means attitude makes open and honest debate impossible. Physicians' self-censoring has become the norm if you want to keep your paycheck and increasingly your medical license. I don't mean to be a downer, but the House of Medicine is sadly divided at this critical moment in history, while ideological political agendas ensure that the crony status quo remains and physician dissidents are silenced. On a more personal note, you will lose close friends to long battles with cancer, and empathy for their inhumane journeys through the medical industrial complex will motivate you to speak up and demand meaningful change. You will proudly join a grassroots movement that calls for transparency and accountability for the conflict of interests which have captured and destroyed our once trusted institutions. You will be fortunate to meet other inspiring Hippocratic Oath advocates, and many of these fellow Mama Bear warriors will become some of your closest friends. The learned helplessness you once felt being a cog in a broken system will be replaced by empowerment, growing your own direct specialty care practice. The appreciation regularly expressed by your patients for the individualized care you provide will fill up your bucket with joy and strengthen your resolve to take back the House of Medicine. One day, you may even be invited to share your story and the wisdom you discovered while pursuing this calling. May the following words of advice help you navigate the inevitable challenges you will face embarking on this arduous but extremely rewarding adventure. Number 1, have a daily self-compassion and gratitude practice. This will make the darkest days feel a bit brighter. Know your worth. Be kind. Don't let your kindness and compassion be mistaken for weakness. Breathe. No, really, pause and focus on your breathing at least a few times a day for a minute. Your nervous system will thank you. Recognize that you may not cure many diseases, but you can comfort all patients. Default to assuming good faith intent, but understand how conflict of interests drive decisions and behaviors. This is especially important when evaluating the business side of medicine. Allow yourself to be vulnerable, understanding we are all a work in progress, and that is a necessary step towards growth. Admit when you are wrong. Admit when you don't know something. You can't build trust any other way, and this is critical for healthy relationships, especially ones between doctor and patient. And lastly, learn how to genuinely forgive. Forgiveness is a helpful life lesson for physicians to teach and model for their patients. It eases much suffering, and this has a healing effect on the body. Imagine our society if more people were able to forgive. That's it.
Dr. Diana Blum, I don't know what to say. That was so powerful. And I am so grateful that you took the time to join us today and share those thoughts. I don't know what to say other than thank you.
Thank you.
And before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to let our audience know where you can be contacted and any other information that you'd like to share.
So mainly on LinkedIn, when the pandemic hit, I basically decided to give up my privacy, I guess. And for the first time, being here in Silicon Valley, I was very much anti-social media. So I resisted. But with the pandemic, I felt like, there's a message I could help. And so that's where you can find me. Just Diana Blum, neurologist on LinkedIn.
This has been a lot of fun. Dr. Diana Blum, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, we really appreciate a review from you, and a 5-star rating helps us a lot. These ratings give our show much more visibility, and they help us reach more listeners. To access exclusive content, check out our Patreon page, where you can see membership-only material, including personal rapid-fire Q&A sessions with our guests. And to be sure you never miss an episode, visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com to subscribe. While you're there, learn how you can earn CME credit from CMify just by listening. Thanks also to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.